Trevor Miller.
Speaker, the Labour Party will be supporting this bill to the Select Committee, and unless something surprising happens, we'll be supporting it through. Before the attorney leaves, gone. I'm sorry.
Order.
I didn't want to draw the attention, but I do have a. Is there a minister in the House who's currently in charge of the bill who can answer questions? There is I think Tremaine the minister. Yeah, there are a couple of ministers in the. Are any of the ministers in the House able to answer questions at the moment on the bill?
Point of order.
This is a first reading.
Louise Upston.
This is a first reading. This is not a committee stage.
No, it's not. But I mean, the member, of course, is allowed to ask questions. Whether they're answered or not is another matter. Call the Honourable Trevor Miller.
The point I was making, I'll make it to the government whip if there's not a minister who's got an understanding of the legislation available, and that is that there has been an undertaking, including the Business Committee, to consider this bill carefully and properly at the Government Administration Committee. My personal view is that it shouldn't take anything like the period up till August to deal with it, and I just don't think it looks good for the House to be putting a limited time on the hearings of the Select Committee around this bill, which does involve the remuneration and other allowances to members of Parliament. I think it would look better for the Parliament if we didn't do that. There's an undertaking to deal with it, in a proper way, not to delay it and to get it back as soon as possible and appropriate. But I think to put an obligation on the Government Administration Committee in the way that has been suggested by the Minister in charge of the bill makes it look like we're hurrying it through in a way which mightn't be seen to be appropriate. And I just want to indicate that it may be better if in fact the Minister doesn't proceed to move the shortening motion, and because the Labour Party will oppose that one, and I think it'll be a pity because I think there's an agreement to move this bill forward. Mr Speaker, I think it would be unwise of me not to point out to you clause 15 of the bill, and to make sure that you're looking carefully at that clause to see whether or not your vote is to be exercised in relation to this legislation, because certainly according to the rumours, Mr Speaker, the conflict between the salary positions of High Commissioners and members of this Parliament is something in which you might have an interest, and certainly anticipate having an interest in the period, I understand, very soon after this bill passes, and that is something to be looked at. Mr Speaker, I think the Attorney summarised the bill well. The Law Commission has done an extensive report on the matter. They have decided, or they have recommended, that a lot of the matters which are currently the subject of determinations should in fact be in primary legislation. I'll be interested in the discussion at the Select Committee as to whether in fact some of the matters which are suggested to go right into the legislation should be in fact left to the committee. The new committee set up based on the Remuneration Authority and augmented. Now there's a balance between the clarity of primary legislation and the inflexibility of primary legislation, and I'll be interested in hearing from the Remuneration Authority and other public law experts as to how much should be in this and how much should be left for them to be determined. Mr Speaker, it's going to be important that the person with appropriate knowledge, skills and experience is added to it. I'll be interested in views as to whether or not that person might be a person who is, or whether a person who is themselves entitled to some of the former members' entitlements is excluded from that position. It's something to be worked through. I think we've found on occasions that there's been quite a lot of debate around the balance between having someone of expertise, someone who understands the way that Parliament works, the requirements on members of Parliament, involved in these discussions, often in the past advising the Speaker as part of a committee. They do often have a better level of understanding, but there does become an issue if in fact they're dealing with matters in which they personally have an interest, if they're dealing with later remuneration. The bill also makes it clear that the Speaker continues to be responsible for directions around the allocation and administration of party member support funding, services provided to members, the out of Parliament offices, and travel allowances for members of Parliament participating in political and interparliamentary programs. And I think that there's no doubt that that is appropriate for the Speaker to be responsible for those. But I think it's also worth saying that there are occasions when these boundaries become very blurred and members are involved in a combination of what are exchange and personal travel, and getting that balance right is important, and making sure that there is not additional unbudgeted cost to the Crown in a way that is not approved where in fact there are extensions is something which is important. It is good that we've brought together, or the bill brings together, the criteria, and they are specified in the bill that are required for the Speaker and the Remuneration Authority to have regard to in issuing directions. And there is what is, I think, referred to around the place now as the Chris Carter clause. The fact that there is, well, no, I don't think. I think it's fair to say that I did not bring up original. I'm not going to claim to be the original author of the description of Chris Carter clause, but the suggestion that people can only be docked $10 a day by the Speaker for not turning up to work without leave, I think is ludicrous. I actually have a view. Well, I think Clayton Cosgrove says that the Jerry Brownlee should be paid an extra $270 a day to stay away, rather than just. But I think that might be unkind, and although I tend to say the Finns might think that is the case. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the things I'd like to have the discussion about is whether the 0.2% is an appropriate amount. Whether we should be considering all of the days of the year, or whether in fact we should be considering sitting days. What is the balance of parliamentary work versus other work for a member of Parliament? And if a person is just not turning up at all, should we be assuming that they are fulfilling the other duties that they have as a member of Parliament when they mightn't even be in the country? They might be out of the country, and I think it'd be worth having that discussion and having a look at whether or not there is discretion in that area. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill which will take some detailed consideration at the Select Committee. I think there could well be some drafting issues that my colleague Chris Hipkins will raise about it. But one of the things that has changed, I think, Mr. Speaker, in my time in this Parliament is a growth in transparency of arrangements for the remuneration of members of Parliament, the services that they provide, and Mr. Speaker, while there might be a few of Mr. Acting Speaker, there might be a few of our older colleagues that are spinning in their graves or spilling their gins at the current time, Mr. Speaker. I think generally transparency has resulted in very good progress.
Speaker.